So then, we are back with the modern understandings from the Renewed Covenant, from the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation is from the original documents of the Hebrews of old, from the time of Israel. The prophecies of those individuals received then understandings from heaven. So then we can understand these times of the end and then take our bearings and then guiding ourselves through this time of the end. Then learning the times and seasons, as then Shaliach Shaul was then endowed from Ruach HaKodesh to go and then teach his people. They would cluster and form their holy cities. However, the Gentiles then would be shepherded by them. Understanding then the factor during the time of Israel as the holy city, comes then the proper viewpoint of what the purpose of the holy city was. The city of God, the city of Yahweh, found then first on a desert, because the people had to be taught. As then they themselves were saved, then the city of God began then its journey through history. Later, then, they received the Holy Land, or the Promised Land. They had to transfer the tabernacle onto the Promised Land, and Israel became then a beacon of light, understanding what it means in the Spirit. Nations would come to Jerusalem because they wanted guidance. So then Shimon, during the time that he was then king, gave us the understanding of what was then the city as a purpose for other nations. They were truly giving directives to the other nations. That's why then you find then many kings coming to Jerusalem, because they want to hear of Yahweh. Later then, when the Messiah came, he brought the first anointing for the second service. Because then the world would be heavily populated, and then it would require more cities in order to save the Gentiles and give the nations directives. So as you understand, then the first service, the first city of God, and then the cities of God, and then directing the nations. It's not invading the nations, it's directing the nations. That's why then during the time of the seat you have an invasion of religion. Religion taking over the trades of the Gentiles. That's the time of the seat. You don't use religion at work. You do the work. When you have situations that requires then directives, then report to the holy city. But you don't use religion to guide your work. Simply do the work. Because the time of the seat had then mixed rulership of the Gentiles and what they thought was God. Never worked. So when the cities were around prior of the 1,000 years of the seat, that's what the purpose. They were giving directives to the other nations. So then directives means the religion were not then used for the purposes of manipulation. They were simply doing the work. So then the nations were at liberty to do the work. So there was a definite separation with religion and divine. However, most of the nations, they mix their divine, but not intended by heaven though. Because from heaven they should do their work separated from religion. That's why Asia is so prosperous, because they were able then to separate their religion from what is practical. So understanding from this viewpoint, then, as we understand also the cities are returning, then we understand what the purpose is. Never mixing religion with work. Do the work, then do the work. If you want to understand heaven, then you get near the city or the holy city, and then you get ministered. That's why Yahweh has decided the nation that has the ability of making sure trade is available for every person, plus they have their own religion, and they don't teach their religion, but they do teach trade. So each nation to his own. While then, if people they want directives from heaven, they know where to report. Report at the holy cities, as it was during the time of Yohanan. This means denominations are absolutely ridiculous. Makes no sense. People no longer work, and have their drive, their denominations. It's ridiculous. Never existed. They were making themselves up what they are not, because never existed. They should only do the work. And if they are nice people, be nice people. Then we begin to understand why Yahweh has decided then to tabernacle amongst the fierce. Because they don't receive crap for very long. If a person is wallowing around, the person understands it. If a person insists in junk, ended up snacks for crocodiles. That's the truth. But then when we read then Yeshayahu, then we begin to understand what he meant. Then many people ask, why are these people so fierce? Because they don't take any junk from people. They are very real. They are very honest. Where the honesty comes from? From the time where then Solomon or Shilimon was doing trade with them. Because there were then cargo from every part of the world during the time of Shilimon. And they were receiving directives. So the nations of Africa, when they had the ancient roots from parts of Africa and then going up north to do trade. And mostly because they would go to Jerusalem and they would bring their gifts in exchange for directives. And they were extremely honest. Now comes then people Westerners with a junky religion. Do you think they're going to take the crap? Oh no. That's why most of Africa is in trouble in revolution, because they don't take junk from other people. Because they understand in the spirit what they are trying to teach is wrong. Because of the character, the type of people. Yahweh said there are many kingdoms and nations, and some of them are a certain kind, some of them are the other kind. Or do you think the people should be like you? No, there are countries that are having specific cultures, and the other culture is another culture, and each of those with certain types. That's why they are very fierce. So then, understanding the prophecy, most importantly, then you find the word tabernacling. Action taken of the presence, tabernacle, and then at a continuous basis amongst the fears. Speaks of the holy city. And then, whatsoever they used to do centuries ago, during the time of Shilimon, they're going to remind themselves of. As the world we understand it from the time of the great prophets, there were then certain nations in charge of the entire world in terms of our perception of Gentile ruling. There were not very many. When the Yahweh is involved with the earth and He's giving directives and completion of the holy prophecies, He decides then a nation should be in charge. That's not for us to argue. We understand for what it is. In the time of Daniel, he had experience with quite a few kings, and the most fierce was the king of Babylon. He was a person of absolutely low tolerance. If he would be lying to him, you have your head removed from you. Absolutely not a speck of lie. You stand before the king, you say the truth. If you don't, you no longer have a life. Thus, you understand what it means, the head of gold. It wasn't because he was rich, can be sure of it. In understanding of the scriptures, a person that never lies. This is what it means. Rich in a word of Yahweh means a person does not lie. A person is honest. Why then he has chosen then the fierce? Because they don't lie. When there is truth, they embrace the truth and they live with the truth. That's why you understand when you read the prophecy. Then, beyond the rivers of Ethiopia in the land of Cush, tabernacling. So then, understanding from the viewpoint of Shaliach Shaul, he was explaining the many areas of the times and seasons, and this season, as we understand, the prophet was then speaking of restoration, and we understand that the restoration then requires understanding from the viewpoint of the prophecies and always related with the Torah. So when you read a prophecy, you have to have a line pointing back to the Torah. Always. You don't speak of any prophecy of itself. You don't link the prophecy with the existing layer of understanding of Gentile ruling outside of the understanding of the Torah. You have to have a line back into the Torah. And what was it then? Yeshayahu was giving extras. Because then the people were being informed of their sins, they were pointing back to the Torah, and then he was giving extras on top of it. So we are speaking extras. After the fact, then the Yeshayahu was pointing the people back to the instructions. So then we don't get led away from the instructions. Because sometimes people can get led away by trying to understand and then the prophecies, and they get excited in understanding, and then what is the Torah? No. First, to understand, the prophet identified the sins. Then he gave them the chance of returning to the Torah, as they did. as they were obedient. Then he gave extras to heighten their motivation of being obedient to the instructions. So must we. Then we are on a proper path. Then we can understand the prophecies. So then Shaliach Shaul, when he was giving directives to his people, a lot of them were mixed up with Gentiles, and this was the most frustrating part for Shaliach Shaul, because he was then pondering his people, and he had then the absolute mandate of making sure his people would receive Ruach HaKodesh and would cluster, because came a time where the cities would be representatives of the city of God, and then going around the world giving them directives. So rather than the nations coming to Jerusalem for directives, they would find then a nearby city of God to find then directives from. And then the Gentiles would be then shepherded. So then when Shaul the Shaliach was then directing his people, there were Gentiles mixed up with him. And then it was not as easy as then he thought. Because Gentiles are from pagan lines. That's what it is. We must face it, and Gentiles are from pagan lines, from pagan cultures. Hebraic people are from the holy culture. If they are obedient or not, that's not the point. The point is, when you think of Yahweh, we think then of the selected people, then a set-apart nation. So then when Shaul was explaining, he was then delegating responsibilities, because the time of the dispensation, or Ruach HaKodesh, was going to be inhabiting amongst them as they would form the city and do what Moses told them to do and observe, except sacrifices. Then they would be ready to give directives to the nations. And we are returning to this time. However, then the junkies are going to be flushed away, because there is this new trade system going on around the world. So rather than people being wallowing around in their junkies, they're going to be focused on this new system provided by Yahweh, so they can get busy and doing work constructively. As there are many people in crisis, they have homes to take care of, refurbishments to take care of, vehicles to be purchased, education, and the very reconstructing of our own economy. And then reminding who we were prior to the Second World War. Understanding that the secular leadership belongs to China. We can't deny this fact. Any nation coming against this fact is going to work against them. And at the end, they get ruined, and then they have to do double restoring, because of their own evils of not understanding times and seasons. So then we should humble ourselves and then understand the times and seasons. As we do, then the world becomes harmonized. We have to get rid of the old junkies. It was a ridiculous time in the entire history of the earth. It was the most ridiculous. Trying to portray heaven in a way that heaven does not portray itself. So that's why comes then the holy cities. So people can release themselves from being compared with the scripture every time, and they release themselves and they get at liberty. They find themselves at liberty to do trade. Please stay tuned. Much more coming up.